In this video I am going to show you how I forge this hammer with very simple tools. I am starting out with a 35 by 35 mm square piece of C45 steel. And I start by marking and center punching where I want to place the eye of the hammer. Normally when you see me punch eyes, I use a fancy eye punch with a handle, but this punch is a very simple handheld punch that I made from an old chisel. After the piece of steel is heated, it's time to start punching the eye, and I take my time to make sure that the eye is centered and in line with the rest of the billet. And once everything is in line, I can start applying more force in each blow. You might also notice that I am turning the billet after each blow. This is to prevent my inaccuracy of holding the punch straight to make an unstraight hole. By turning after every blow, my inaccuracy evens itself out. Once I get about 2/3 of the way through, it's time to start working from the other side. By looking at how the billet has swelled in the middle, I can usually eyeball where to mark and start punching from the other side of the billet. So what we are doing when we're punching the eye is that we are forcing the material down on itself. When we flip the billet and start working from the other side, the two holes eventually meet, and the material that's left is then sheared off. So it's very important that the two holes are in line with each other, otherwise you might not end up with a clean hole. After the hole is punched, it's time to start drifting the eye, and the reason we do that is to shape and make the eye larger. After the drifting is done, you could technically call it quits and be proud to have forged a hammer. However, I want to take it a few steps further and forge some set downs in front of the eye and later a peen section on the hammer. To start forging the set downs, I wanted to try using my old guillotine tool that I rarely have a chance to try. What otherwise only would be possible with a top and bottom tool and a striker in the shop is now possible thanks to the guillotine tool. After the set downs are in place, I switch over to my spring fullers. They are less accurate than the guillotine tool, but I can use way more force in each blow, therefore forging faster. After I'm done with the set downs, it's time to start forging the lugs or ears of the hammer. Now this is a very slow process, even though I am using an aggressive Peen hammer. The main reason why it takes so long to forge by hand is that you need to go over all 4 sides individually. I start from the middle and work my way down towards the thick part of the drift. The reason for this is that I only want to forge where I have contact with the drift. Otherwise, I would risk deforming the eye. After all that aggressive forging, I go over everything with the flat side of the hammer to smooth out the aggressive marks left by the peen of the hammer. It's time to start forging the peen section of the hammer, and I chose to start by using the spring fullers to make an initial set down that in a way will act like a waypoint for me while forging the peen. After the initial set down is in place, I can confidently start forging out the peen section with more force. And personally, I find that the horn of the anvil works great for that due to the angle at which I can hold the material. Doing this all by hand, you will most likely get some kind of a fish mouth at the end of the peen section. I remove this by hot rasping, and if you've never tried that, you should. You will be surprised as to how fast and effective it actually is. At this point, it's all about the aesthetics of the piece. I am not quite happy about the transition from the lugs to the peen section, so I am trying to make that curve a little bit more aggressive. One of the unsung heroes in my workshop is the flatter. I use it for almost every project, and it's a great tool for evening out and smoothing out the surfaces of almost any piece.
Alright, so I'm done with the forging process and I'm very happy with how this turned out. Now I was a little bit worried about forging the set downs in front of the eye, but thanks to the spring fullers that went really easy and you can really pound them and you can feel that something was moving underneath it, so that was a blast to do by hand. Now the next step is that we're going to prepare it for heat treatment, and now I am one of those extreme guys that actually think that an angle grinder is one of the most essential tools that you can have in your toolkit, and I also think that it's one of the first tools that you should buy if you're starting out as a blacksmith, because it's a very cheap and very versatile tool. So I'm going to rough grind it with an angle grinder, and then we're going to clean it up with files, and then we're going to heat treat it.
So the reason why you see me clean up the peen of the hammer so much is because it was very hard for me to do with the hammer, which makes me think that I should probably make some tools for that in the future. Now the important part is to dress the peen and the face of the hammer, and I start by using the angle grinder to rough it out, and then I use files to clean everything up. Personally, I like my hammer face to be a little bit on the rounder side, so that's how I make them. I almost forgot to mark my work, so before I heat treat the hammer, I heat it up again so I can punch in my maker's mark. So it's time to heat treat the hammer, and I simply place it in the forge to let it heat up slowly, and I move it around in the forge to try to make the heat as even as possible. Now it is important that you understand that the colors on the screen not necessarily represents how it looks in reality. The camera tends to make everything just a little bit brighter. The steel that I am using is a water-quenched steel, so I quench it in water and then I take it out and I use a sandpaper to slightly touch the face of the hammer so that I can see bare steel. That way, during tempering, I can look for the color change in the steel to know at what temperature I'm at. To temper the hammer, I heated an old hammer drift that I had laying around, and the idea is that the heat will spread from the eye to the peen and the face of the hammer, making the hammer softer or tougher around the eye and harder at the peen and the face. Once the heat treatment is done, I test the hardness of the hammer face and peen by using my trusty old Japanese Rockwell files. Now I pretty much did all the grinding before I heat treated the hammer, so all I really have to do now is to clean it up to my preferred liking. So I do that by using sandpaper, and then I use a Scotch-Brite disc on my angle grinder to polish the face and the peen. This is one of the reasons why the angle grinder is such a versatile tool to have around. After that, I switch the Scotch-Brite disc to a wire brush, and that's how I clean the rest of the hammer. Now I don't go into the details about making a handle in this video, but if you are interested in learning more, might I suggest to take a look at this video next after you're done watching this one. In that video I show you how I make an axe handle from scratch with very simple tools, and the process is very similar. The liquid that I am adding to the handle is a mixture of raw linseed oil, pine tar and turpentine, about a third each, and I found that it works very well to protect the wood, and it makes it look amazing, and it even smells amazing.
Thank you so much for watching the video. I really hope you enjoyed it. So in today's video, we made a cross peen hammer again, and I'm giving it away again. And just like last time, it would really mean a lot to me if this hammer could go to someone that's actually going to use it or is in need of a new hammer. So if you're interested in starting forging, or if you just started out, or maybe you need a new hammer for some reason, please let me know in the comment section and I will pick one that will get this hammer. So making this hammer was actually easier than I first thought that it would be, and the primary reason for that is most likely that I started with a smaller starting stock. So instead of starting with 40 by 40 millimeter stock that I usually make my hammers out of, well, it's not like I'm usually making hammers, but those few times that I've made hammers, I've started with that starting material. I started with 35 times 35 millimeters instead, and even though it sounds a little, it was quite significantly easier to move than the 40 by 40, I can tell you that. I was also quite impressed actually how well the spring fullers worked and how much material you can move under them actually. Now I did use a heavy hammer, I did use my 2.5 kilo hammer. That helped a lot. Now starting with a smaller stock billet also means that the hammer itself is lighter than my other hammer, but it's still heavy enough for it to be a very comfortable weight when forging. So this hammer weighs all in all 900 grams, so almost a kilo, which is a very comfortable weight in my opinion to use as a forging hammer. Anyways, I hope that this video was somewhat educational for you. I know for sure that it was for me. I also want to take a moment to thank everyone who chose to support what I do here, either over at Patreon or via YouTube membership. You guys help me make these videos for free for everyone to watch, so thank you so much for that. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.